How's it going, guys? Shane here from the GnG Elite DBS team, and today we're going to take a look at our fellow teammate Ryan Miller's top 32 in Orlando Masked Saiyan deck list. So, Ryan couldn't be here today to talk about the list with us because the tournament finished up real late Sunday, and he had work Monday morning, had like a 9-hour drive ahead of him, so he just gave me his deck and sent me kind of like a synopsis of the deck and some personal feelings about the deck after playing it all weekend. Because he did play this deck not only in teams, where he went 5-0 personally, and then in singles, where he went 5-1. His only loss being to a Golden Frieza Victory Strike deck, because Victory Strike's Victory Strike. You know, it kind of is what it is. Not a whole lot you can do against that, especially when you're playing red. So, again, I still am sick, so if I start coughing, I'm sorry. Just try and bear with me here. Also, I don't have his little article that he sent me memorized, so I'm going to have to be reading off of it, so kind of bear with me there too. So, as you can see, we do have the Masked Saiyan leader right here. For anybody who doesn't know, it's activate main once per turn. Place top 3 cards of your deck in your drop area. If you place a black card in the drop area with this skill, this card gains critical. When your life's at 4 or less, you draw 2, so he's a draw 2 leader. His backside is activate main once per turn. Place top 3 cards of your deck in your drop area. If you place a black card in your drop area with the skill, card gains critical for the duration of the turn. If a card of any other color is placed in the drop area, this card gains plus 5,000 power for the duration of the turn, and when this card attacks, draw a card. So, it does, in theory, do fairly bad into Janemba because you're milling yourself. However, I believe Ryan said his Janemba matchup wasn't that bad because he could just kill them before he milled out, so that's relevant. Nice interaction here with Masked Saiyan as well is you can mill on the front to gain 5,000, and critical awaken, you'll lose critical, but you keep the 5,000 and then do it again, and as long as you hit the way you should, you'll be a 25,000 critical that turn. So that's pretty relevant. Alright, let me start skimming his article here and start trying to give you all some information. So, of course, this was Ryan Miller of the GnG Elite DBS team. Yes, he did go 5-1 in the singles events. It was a personal meta call for him, as Ryan does tend to gravitate towards aggressive decks, and he asked himself what the current meta had as a weakness. The answer to him was the Awaken skill of all the current leaders. Recovering 2 energy is a strong mechanic, but it makes these leaders very weak to aggression, especially when set aggression is critical based. Ryan did write an article for the Patreon just before Orlando with the full list for Masked Saiyan that he intended to take to the Team Wars event on Saturday. Granted, it was completely untested, and he did make a few last-minute tweaks to the list, but you can look at what he thought was a more well-rounded version of the deck by subbing to our Patreon, and by now that article should actually be free. You shouldn't even have to actually sub to the Patreon. You should just be able to go and look at it. He did pile the deck to an undefeated finish Saturday in Team Wars, but his team, you know, had kind of a rough day, so they didn't do too hot. But Saturday just gave him a proper testing session to know what adjustments to make for singles on Sunday. So his matchups on Sunday, no, I'm sorry, this is day 1 and day 2. So Saturday in teams, he 2-0'd Broly Lineage. Day 1, round 2, 2-0'd Frieza Swap. Round 3, he 2-0'd a Pan List. Round 4, he 2-0'd Baby Vegeta. And round 5, his opponents no-showed. Day 2, he 2-0'd Janemba round 1, so that's pretty relevant there. He lost to Golden Frieza Victory Strike 0-2 in round 2, who is another local player of ours, so he wasn't too upset to see that loss. Round 3, he believes he played Sam Ackerman, which was Vegeta Baby, and he won 2-0. Round 4, he 2-1 Broly Lineage, sided into a heavy 8 package. And round 5, he 2-0'd Janemba again, which is very relevant here. Round 6, he was supposed to play Dylan Ashcraft's Baby Vegeta, but he had a flight to catch, so he gave Ryan the win. So, 2-0 against Janemba, doing pretty well into the Broly decks, doing really well into the red decks. Maybe this deck's not that bad. Maybe it's something we should have taken a look at before the format ended. Ryan does go on to say that the strength of the Masked Saiyan leader is obviously the critical and access to ridiculous amounts of overwhelm. On paper, it doesn't seem that great to overwhelm every turn while you're essentially cheating the energy cost on your card. It also warps at the end of the turn, so it guarantees that you're losing at least 1 card per turn with no viable way to draw more. The style of the deck does want you to aggressively combo with cards like Furthering Destruction Champa and the East Kai Double Strike to capitalize on the power of critical in the early game. The advantage of this playstyle is that you'll usually hit your opponent for 3 critical on turn 1 by comboing Chomp on the leader attack and following up with an Overwhelm 4 into Crit Mirror. Putting your opponent from 8 to 5 on turn 1 without putting a single card into their probably 5-card hand is insane. But then on turn 2, you'll most likely put them to 3 life and force the Awaken. This meta is full of untapped leaders, so at this point they should have 6 cards in hand if they draw when attacking. So basically your opponent is awakened on turn 2 with a 6-card hand to try and fight back and defend their life. At this point we start going into our discard package, provided that we draw into it. Usually by the end of turn 3, his opponent's had around 2 to 4 cards in hand and no field because it's hard to justify paying energy and losing cards from hand when you're against a deck like this. Turn 4, if the game was completely locked up, then he would just play Forcing Hit. Take anything of value left in their hand. From this point, he has 2 options depending on how many cards they kept. If only 1 card in hand, Overwhelm into the Relentless Destruction Mira and force them to discard it. If it was 2 cards, Overwhelm into Critical Mira and force the combo on the Leader Swing. This leaves them with no hand and 3 life to face down a critical attack and a double strike from Hit. I didn't fact check any of these things he just said with hand size and everything. I just trust Ryan that this is all accurate. So if there is something wrong, don't tear me up too hard about it. The hardest matchup he had by far was the Golden Frieza deck. Game 1, he says he opened very slow and got victory striked out. Game 2, again, very slow opening, but his sideboard was subpar for this type of matchup. He expected Broly to be the only yellow leader that he would run into, so he kept his board package for that deck on the light side. That match ends too fast to utilize multiple Killy Zones or Harus, and he got destroyed against the Golden Frieza leader simply because he was trying to play the match as if he were like the other leaders, and that's not the case at all. And you do see this a lot when players run into decks or leaders that aren't meta. They approach them in the way they would approach meta leaders, and that isn't always the right route. So that seems to be a big mistake Ryan made here, and one I doubt he'll make again. The draw 2 skill hurt big time for his hand, which didn't have the aggression to force the hand size down. Eventually his advantage on Ryan just snowballed. As he told Jordan when he sat down in front of him, he had the only leader in the entire room that he felt had a good matchup on Ryan. And that's something Ryan typically will do. That's very Ryan-esque. The Broly, Baby Vegeta, Pan matches are all pretty much the same. You're not going to be able to effectively play threats and defend yourself, so you have to race Ryan to 0 life and try to outgrind him. The best matchup into these 3 leaders is definitely Pan... Or, I'm sorry, Ryan's best matchup with those 3 leaders is Pan, then Vegeta Baby, then Broly. Pan just can't build a hand. She has to play cards to draw cards. Baby Vegeta has Revenge Death Ball, which is frankly the only card in their deck that concerned him. It just meant that he had to play around it and not combo into his 15k attacks, which was fine. They're going to take the critical or use a card to stop it. Broly is more difficult only because he can usually snag a life or 2 and draw some cards before you get the pressure heavily on him. This matchup really depends on how many super combos they manage to find before turn 3. If it's 3 or 4, they can probably grind your aggression out. But even that is a stretch. If they're playing Lineage, you're probably going to kill them before they make it to 4 energy. This seems pretty accurate to me, based on what Ryan's talking about. Criticals always, like Mass Saiyan and other critical decks like that, have always done really well into Self-Awakeners, like Broly. So, now, to the big one, Janemba. Ryan knows this is the one everyone has to be scratching their heads on. How in the world did Mass Saiyan 2-0 Janemba twice? Well, on paper, this matchup looks unwinnable, but it's far from that. You're honestly looking at a 60-40 in favor of Mass Saiyan in the first 2 turns of the game. Usually you can get them down to 3 or 4 life and stop using your leader skill every turn. Yes, you'll be helping them mill you and speed up their win condition for a couple of turns, but card quality is a huge factor in deciding games. Fortunately, your cards are way better on a small hand size than Janemba's. Forcing a discard skill into play and then making them combo to stop the attack just slices their hand to bits. On top of their negates, every action they do to keep themselves out of range of lethal means one more card they won't have to defend with in a turn or 2. The strategy is simple here. Mulligan hard for Champas and critical overwhelms, primarily Mira, and force the crit damage hard and fast. Don't play cards like Intensify Power Trunks because we want them to be forced into attacking our leader, which keeps our hand size up. They will mill our cards for us, so we aren't really forced into using our leader skill after we have them awakened. They will generally keep a 4 to 5 card hand going into awaken, but they lose access to their 4-cost Janembas as they're unable to tap out and you have no battle cards in play. And they can't afford to play Deadly Defenders or Vegeta on curve because the risk of discard, Overwhelm, and Hit would just destroy it and put them down by 2 or 3 cards just for making 1 play. So, that's the main juice of what Ryan typed out for the deck. Now we can get to the deck list, which I know is what all y'all are looking for. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, we do have 4 Intensifying Power Trunks. Just your typical red 1-drop, critical, generate some advantage, apply the pressure. Ryan said it's... Ryan didn't really do any notes because it's pretty much a, staple at this point. 3 Dependable Mom Bulma. Ryan labeled this card as filler for the most part, but was good for forcing crits and keeping cards out of Revenge Death Ball range. That is important. Next up, we have 4 Burst Attack Son Gohan. You keep a low hand size until Awakening, so if you get a subpar start, he's great. He's also good if they play very defensively with Nimbus or something, and you burn out. 4 Forcing Hit. This is a red deck. Ryan says best card in the deck. Hit is usually the best card in your deck. It's very good. You basically can't lose if you resolve this card in this deck style. Makes sense, you're grinding out your opponent's advantage, and then you just use Hit to rip away what little bit they have left. 4 Furthering Destruction Champa. He said also best card in the deck. Could be Isekai if you prefer, but you could also just add Isekai to have even more than 4 of these. Excuse me. 4 Crit Mira. Best turn 1 or 2 overwhelm in the deck by far. Hard to defend against the 20k crit early, even for Janemba. 4 Relentless Destruction Mira. He said it's the best overwhelm if you're also holding a hit on turn 4. Otherwise, it's just solid to force hand size down on a post-awakened leader. They have to discard and then use another card to stop him. So basically, you want to try and play this card with hit to get 3 cards out of their hand, and that's really good. 2 Scientist Fu. Ryan said he hardly ever used them, was mostly just against Baby and Broly, but the matchups where he's good, he's real good. He turned him into a discard effect versus Broly, Bloodlust, but then they were tapped down to 1 or 0, and they still had to stop a 25k body and his leader. Next up, we've got 3 Banisher Fu. Banisher Fu is mainly for Baby Vegeta, probably the best deck to counter this as he... I think Ryan might say best card to counter this, as he kills all of his stuff and draws a lot. Mulligan hard for this card in that matchup, only really necessary if they open Nuts in turn 2 or 3 Ape you. You'll have them awaken, play a Trunks or Bulma to pop the Ape ability, then Overwhelm and Warp Baby. This forces them to deal with a 20k Double Striker and the Leader Swing when they're most likely at 3 life. Fu is also out of Death Ball range, which is important to note. Banisher Fu is probably going to become even more of a staple in the next format, and was honestly should have already been a staple with Vegeta Baby and things running around. 4 of the TP5 revived Ravager Vegeta. Ryan says probably the worst overwhelm in the deck. He only used him when he literally had no other overwhelm option. I mean, the card's not terrible. It is a free critical 15k attacker, and does replace its overwhelm cost. So it's not completely terrible, though it is easy to see why it's probably the worst overwhelm in the deck. Ryan did note that he never used the mill skill, was just there to be a crit attacker for free. And there's another thing, the mill skill is optional. It's up to 3, so you can mill 0. 3 Dimension Support Trunks with 4 Yamcha Vanillas. Probably should have been at 4, but he kept drawing him after all his Yamchas were milled or played out during Team War, so it felt bad. Dimension Support Trunks is in here to go wide with Yamchas and apply a bit of board control in certain matchups. You're either swinging him into other battle cards or comboing him into your crit swings. The exception is having the opponent have 3 or less life and attacking to force a combo. That makes a lot of sense. 4 super combos. It's pretty self-explanatory. They're usually active on turn 1, and most of Ryan's matches he won without ever seeing a single super combo in his hand. 2 of the Dimension Control Demigra. Ryan said this card was really insane in the late game, forces him to lose a card pretty much no matter what. He's a big 20k beater, and 9 times out of 10 they'll be discarding a battle card, so he's actually 25 or 30. Good to get over 8 blockers or Deadly Defenders / Vegito. Also good to just force a damage against the likes of Janemba and put them into lethal range with a hit or a Fu the next turn. And the final card, he played a 1-of Surprise Attack Frieza, which he said was literally the worst card in the deck. Doesn't work against most of the abilities he encountered all weekend. Baby doesn't KO its things. Going Frieza places them in a drop. No one used blockers against him, etc. The card was great in theory, assuming people would play a card that he could attack into and force combos or get a free crit attacker, but it just didn't really happen. So that was it for the main board. Now we've got Ryan's sideboard. He did put 1 more of the Surprise Attack Frieza in the sideboard, which all he labeled next to it was mistake, so he probably wishes he didn't do that. A 4th copy of Dimension Support Trunks was the best card in his sideboard all weekend. He said it came in every game. 2 Haru Attacker Majin. He said it was too slow, but it didn't get bloodlusted at all, so that was a plus. 2 minus Killy Zone. His note for this was that it should have been 4 Killy Zone and 0 Haru Haru. Killy Zone was just more beneficial to him throughout the event. 2 Dark Power Black Mask Saiyan. His version of Chronoa, he wanted his opponent to play their Shugesh into this card and rip their hand apart. This card also covers way more decks to him, so that's a fair point. 2 Burst Energy Super Saiyan Bardock. It's for barrier removal, though he may need him versus Lineage, but didn't. He also never came in, so he never sideboarded this card in whatsoever. Excuse me. 2 Digging Deep Vegeta. Only came in against Janemba and any decks that can play Striving Goku to halt your use of Trunks to awaken. He's also very good in the late game, turn 3. Card to force damage and set up a hit for the next turn. I'm sure this card was fantastic versus Janemba. Maybe Ryan could have even upped it to 3 with how good it is against Janemba. And, you know, him regretting some of these sideboard choices. So that maybe could be a 3. 2 Mirror Creator Absorbed. Was only good against Janemba and occasionally a good bloodless target. Or no, I'm sorry, was good against bloodless decks because he has Deflect. But Ryan never drew into him. Every time he was sided in, he got milled. That's part of the thing with playing a leader like Masan. RNG is a thing. And last but not least, 1 Miraculous Comeback Ultimate Gohan. He felt like this card was absurd in a deck with such a small hand size for the earlier turns of the game. Turns out he wasn't. Same principle as Frieza, was meant to come in against blockers and decks that committed to the board, which none really did. So it stayed in the sideboard all tournament. He can see him returning to power later. This card could very easily become good later. Same with Yamcha at 100%. Both these cards are very good. Alright, so that was it for Ryan's Decklist, guys. Sorry for the quality of the video. I couldn't use my phone when I'm the only one doing this. I typically need someone to either do the deck profile or hold the phone for me. So I'm using my webcam, which is not the best. Excuse me. Sorry. Hopefully that's the last time I coughed during this. But anyways, that's it for Ryan's 5-1 Mass Saiyan deck profile. If you want to include Team Wars, he went a grand total of 10-1 this weekend with the Mass Saiyan. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Make sure to sub to the channel. Check out our Patreon. Check out the Twitch. Patreon, like I said, articles go free after like 2 days, I think it is. So you don't have to sub just to read the articles. Maybe you'll enjoy just reading the articles for free. And that's what they're there for. Like the channel, or like the video, I'm sorry. Comment if you have any questions. And make sure to stay tuned, because Ryan always plays spicy decks like this, refuses to play the meta. So I think you all really enjoy a lot of his decks in the future. So that's it for me, guys, and stay elite.